Hi, BookTube. Oh, it's Sunday morning. It's a bit October, a bit chilly, and I think it's time for a tag video because we had such a long Middlemarch meditation session, didn't we, in the middle of the week? And so I just feel like I need to chill, so I need to do a tag. Tag I'm going to do today is the Bring Back Browsing tag, and I was tagged by Talia Nerds Out, who must be wondering, because she tagged me ages ago, if Heather Reads is ever going to do this tag. I've got a tag backlog. I'll be honest, and I've got to get through them, but there's so much to do, so much to do. And this tag was created by Roving Reader, and there'll be links to both channels in my description box. Okay, no more preamble. Let's get going. Prompt number 1, the magic of discovery. And this is about sharing a book that you found while browsing that you may not have discovered otherwise. And I love this so much. I did 3. I found 3 books, that is. And I did something I've never done before. I have never gone to the Google search window and typed in books with the word fill in the blank in the title. Never done it. So I thought I would try 3 different searches. Now, when I did these searches, it was some time back, because I was hoping to do this tag earlier, but there you go. I was reading Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's. So the word I put in, I searched for books with the word lunch in the title. Now, we all know one very famous novel with the word lunch in the title. It's funny, though, none of the books which came up as a result of that search, which had lunch in the title, none of them really grabbed me. If I were in a bookstore, I wouldn't have pulled any of them out to have a closer look. But one came up which didn't have lunch in the title, and that's the one I gravitated toward. And so what I would really like to choose is The Marmalade Diaries by Ben Aitken. He's an author I'd never heard of before. This is his account of a 35-year-old single man, i.e. Ben, and his decision to rent a room that belongs to an 85-year-old widow named Winnie. And then COVID lockdown starts. Yeah, that sounds really cool. So that's my first recommendation. My second, the person who watches television was watching a program about road construction, and it was a UK program, so naturally they were talking about the cost of these projects in pounds sterling. So my next search was books with the word pounds in the title. Nothing came up. Every book that came up did not have the word pounds in the title. I found that really amusing. In the end, I picked this purely because of the cover graphic and the subject matter. So what I picked was Swindled by B. Wilson, and it's a history of food tampering. I love it. I'm probably going to buy this book because I love it when people look deeply into niche corners of history. So yeah, look out for that sometime later. And my third book, well, this is a credit to Will Chambers. It's a shout out to you, Will. You were reviewing Anita Bruckner's A Start in Life. I was watching that and I got the idea, okay, our third search will be look for books with the word start in the title. Well, that search totally did not work. What I mean is Google thought for some reason that what I really wanted to do was search for books with the word the in the title. Seriously. I tried rewording the search, didn't matter. It just did not work. So I gave in. I picked one of the links. It took me to a Goodreads page where it listed books with 2-word titles where the first word was the. And I thought, okay, there were 697 entries on that list. And I thought, okay, I'm going to pick a book from this list and I'm going to give myself 2 criteria. First criteria, the second word in that title has got to not really be a noun, not in the dictionary sense of the word. And the second criteria is I have never heard of the author before in my life. And I've got a really cool book. I'm going to show you this one. It is called The Unpassing, written by Jia Lin. And I love this book because it's the story of an immigrant family from Taiwan who choose to go and live in the outskirts of, wait for it, Anchorage, Alaska. And that just seemed challenging on so many levels. So all those books, by the way, they've been added to my Read What I Own challenge post when I can buy books list, because I can't get enough books on that list now. Anyway, next prompt. Prompt 2, expanding world. So here I'm supposed to share a book that has made me view the things from a different perspective or expose me to new ideas. Well, I mean, I could name so many. I was pulling books out of my shelf, and what ended up happening was that I made the 10 books that made me video, didn't I, last month? That's what happened there. This book that I'm going to show you now, it could have made the cut. I had to make the cut somewhere. I suppose it didn't have the same dramatic effect, but I'm thinking I might need to reread it because it could be important right now. So this book is Old Masters and Young Geniuses by David Galenson. This book, what it does is it compares artists like Picasso, who became famous very young, very quickly, with artists like Cézanne, who had the same length of career, but his work didn't begin to get recognized and sell well until he was much older. And it compares the way those artists worked, the way they thought about art, and it discusses this concept of genius and made me realize that maybe there are two kinds of creative geniuses. And that made me think differently about old age. Now, when I read this book, it was 2006. I was only 42. I think a bit differently about it now that I'm 60. Right, but it made me wonder if for some people, their best time, their most creative and vital time is actually when they're older. And then from that, I also wondered whether older people really need to think differently about old age. Think of it maybe more as their time for bringing something new into the world, rather than thinking that their time for contributing to society is finished. Prompt 3, open to change. And here I'm supposed to share a book that has changed who I am as a person or altered my day-to-day habits. I think in the 10 books that made me tag, I mentioned Natalie Goldberg's Wild Mind. But I don't know if I really talked about how much her Zen Buddhist practice contributed to the way she does creative work and the way she advises others to do creative work. Because writing of any kind can be tough. And I imagine, yes, there are probably different techniques for helping the brain to get new ideas or just to be able to gain a synthesis of understanding from a number of ideas, a collection of ideas. Natalie helped me respect my subconscious, to realize that that was a source, and it was a source that I couldn't force. If you have to force writing, what I learned was if you're forcing it, if it feels like you're just pushing yourself to get any words down, that's a sign that you haven't given your mind, your subconscious mind, enough time to play with ideas or concepts, or you haven't fed it enough research so that it can give you something back. Now, there's another book as well, though, in addition to Wild Mind, one that has helped my writing habits was Writing in Flow by Susan Perry. Dr. Perry, she combined study data with personal experiences of artists to come up with ways to achieve a state of mind where that subconscious can be allowed through more easily, or allowed to be the dominant type of thinking. And that reinforced Natalie's point, really, that there's a mind that writes and a mind that edits, and they're two different animals, and they should not be in close proximity to each other. They can't work together. Writing, the actual act of creating, should be an open, maybe a little dreamy, kind of an unhinged process where you're allowed to produce quantity more than quality. And then there's editing, which is a more conscious, level-headed choosing and reworking of all that quantity. And I learned that doing creative work means learning how to keep those two minds operating in their optimal conditions and not interfering with each other. And I do this with book reviews. At the moment that I finish a book, I may not know what I want to say, and I have to actually allow a few days to pass and just percolate it in that subconscious mind. Keep asking myself, and I know that there's something that happens that is beyond my conscious awareness. When I finally come down to write, things just seem to come from I don't know where in my brain. And that was true when I wrote fiction as well. If I was struggling, if I was just staring at my screen or my notebook, that's when I knew I needed to give my mind time to play, time to be free, time to be a bit bored, really. And that would be the thing that would kickstart that subconscious creative process. And the final prompt is asking me to go and browse in a bookstore or a library or a friend's shelves and talk about what I found there. Well, I'm going to do two things here. Firstly, you know from a previous video that myself and the person who watches television, we crossed the county boundary from Northamptonshire into Cambridgeshire, went to Huntingdon Library and got a Cambridgeshire library card, because we're allowed to hold library cards in the county we live in, but also in the neighbouring county. And now that means that we have expanded the amount of books that we can borrow and reserve. And I'm looking forward to that, because as you'll know, when I do my Read What I Own challenge video, which is coming up again very shortly, you'll find out that I really want to drive my reading of library books in a more purposeful way. So we browsed in that library. I brought back a biography of Leo Tolstoy, which you're going to hear about next. And I saw something that I nearly brought home, but I knew I wasn't going to get time to read it. But it really fascinated me. It was this, because I thought I knew everything Alexander Solzhenitsyn had written. I knew all his novels. I didn't know that he wrote short stories. So this is his collection of short stories called Apricot Jam. And if it's still there the next time we go to Huntingdon Library, I have a funny feeling it's going to come home with me. But I also did a kind of like the other sort of browsing, a friend's shelves. See, I love it when a BookTube creator reminds you, by showing you their own book, they remind you that you have got the same book on your shelves, and you think, yeah, that was a book that was worth reading or worth rereading. And Joseph Francis Burton recently did a video about Elaine Pagels, and specifically about one of her books, which is called The Gnostic Gospels. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls. They got a lot of media time. They were thousands of fragments of Jewish texts that dated back to the 3rd century BC that were discovered in the mid-40s. There was another set of manuscript fragments discovered in Egypt round about the same time, but they didn't come to public attention until after 1975. That's when the first translations of the texts were published. And these were early Christian texts. And what is important about them is that they date back, they either predate or they're contemporary with the adoption of Christianity as the religion of the Roman Empire in 380 AD. And this is critical because when Christianity became a state religion, it calcified. That is, one small group of Christians decided which beliefs about Jesus and which writings about Jesus would be permitted, would be allowed, would be considered Christian. The Nag Hammadi texts are evidence of a more diverse body of belief on this subject, something that scholars were aware of, but they were really only aware of it because they had the writings of people who disagreed with those beliefs and who were labeling those beliefs as heretical. Elaine Pagels' book about the Nag Hammadi discovery, that came out in 1979, and that was the year after I became an evangelical Christian, so I didn't read it then, obviously. I read it in 2002, and that was 2 years after I stopped attending, and it rocked my world because my church had their own mythology about the origins of Christianity. And in that mythology, they represented the original true faith, the torchbearers of what Jesus really taught. And all the other mainstream Christian churches, the ones who effectively carried on with the religion that was established by Rome in 380 AD, though my church taught that all those other people, they'd gone astray, In other words, my church saw itself as heretical. And they created this idea in my mind that there were only two groups of Christians way back when, right? There were those who went with Rome, and then there was our church who did not, and we were the one true faith that got lost. Now, Nag Hammadi completely destroyed, blew up that myth. Not that I was believing it much by then, but it blew it up completely because it showed that Christianity was actually incredibly diverse. There were many, many, many different belief systems about Jesus. And so if we were heretics, well, we were just one of many. And how on earth do you tell what is true or what is not? And this allowed me to ask really healthy questions about whether we could be sure that any Christian teaching really represents what Jesus was or what he taught. And I just think there was a good place for me to go. And Pagels' book taught me then to love that diversity, to be really interested in it, because the Gospels themselves are fascinating. The creation of the stories are fascinating. And this creativity of belief, that's what I began to respect. I began to respect that creativity. And that the worst thing that could happen to belief was any attempt to control it, to restrict it, to become intolerant of a lot of different beliefs, or censor them, or ban books. Dot, 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 right? Just saying. All these restrictive behaviors, they change faith into a political exercise of power over others. And you could make, I don't know how many videos about the damage that that has done. Down in my description box, you will also find a video of Elaine Pagels. She's discussing the Gnostic Gospels. She's giving one of the Price lectures in Boston. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, now it just remains for me to tag other people. Okay, first of all, Meg at Books Off the Beaten Path. I watched one of Meg's videos the other day where she was saying, oh, not many people tag me. And she said I was one of the people who did. And yes, I am. And so if she needs a tag, I'd say, hey, Meg, if you like these questions, the bring back browsing questions, please feel free to go ahead and do this tag. I'm also going to tag, of course, Joseph Francis Burton, because, you know, Joe, Gnostic Gospels, wouldn't have pulled it off my shelf and thought, I'm going to reread that if it weren't for your videos. So if you like these questions, go ahead. Marion H. reads, same thing. You like them. You always come up with books that I like anyway. So I'm looking forward to that video, because I usually end up putting something on my wish list because of your videos. And Book Ramble. This is a channel that I recently discovered. Mark started it about 2 months ago, and I'm going to add a link to his newbie video. He's a great discovery. He reads and he talks about the timeless older works like Sun Tzu's The Art of War, the Bhagavad Gita, and Beowulf. And he has an interest in 18th century English naval history. I just find that fascinating, all the different interests that he had. I can't see a tag video that he's done yet, but maybe he's just waiting to be tagged. So Mark, if you like these prompts and you'd like to do a video of your own, I would definitely check it out. Okay, that's it. Sunday tag done. Now we go and do other Sunday things, which I hope you will do too. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.